My name is Gaia Athena, and in this video I'm going to give you my 2021 reading statistics. In this video I'm going to show you statistics, graphs and charts and such of my 2021 reading, and also in comparison to previous years. If you see a pie chart without any comparison to previous years, it's probably about 2021. And if you see a graph that does compare years, well, I think you'll get it as we get into it. Just a warning beforehand, this video is probably going to be quite long because I am a nerd and a geek and I love thinking about reading statistics and making lots of graphs. So pretty best to watch this video when you have some time and when you can actually hopefully see the screen rather than just listen. But anyway, thank you very much for clicking on this video. Let's get into it. So first off, in 2021 I read 240 books, and in this graph you can see how this compares to earlier years. I started keeping track of my statistics in June 2012, but since that's only half the year, I've just plotted here from 2013 on. And then we have pages read. In 2021 I read 63,887 pages, and this is the graph that shows these two statistics combined, so books and pages. So here we have a pie chart, and this is about 2021. 82% of the books I read in 2021 were new to me, and 18% were rereads, which is that's quite a bit. I reread some things, and when we put that against other years, so on the y-axis we have percentages of books read, then it looks like I reread a bit more in 2021 than in the past few years, but not strangely so. I seem to, if I look at this graph, then it looks like in 2013, 2014, 2017 and 2021, also a bit 2020, I reread quite a bit, whereas in 2015 and 2016 and 2018 and 2019 I didn't reread quite as much. So I don't know. Then in 2021 I almost exclusively read physical books, and only 3% were ebooks. I think that'd be the Murderboard Diaries on my Kindle, but it's possible I also read something else on my Kindle. And when I look at the graph showing physical versus digital for all the years, then I'm definitely on a trend of mostly reading physical books and not that many digital books. Just as a note, I can't do audiobooks, so they are not in my statistics because with my disability I can't listen to audiobooks. In 2013 I used my Kindle a lot. I was traveling a lot then as well, or commuting I guess is the word. But since I've mostly been at home the past few years, and particularly in 2020 and 2021, I have been at home almost all the time. So yeah, not that much reading on my Kindle because I much prefer physical books, as I have learned. Now we get to book source. So this is about 2021 again, pie chart. 90% of the books that I read in 2021 were books I own, and 9% came from the library. This was the one time that I was able to go to the library in 2021. I borrowed the maximum amount of books, and then it looks like 1% came from a was free to read on author's website, and it says 0% others, but there is a little bit, and I know I borrowed a book from my parents, so that'll be what that is. Yeah, I hope to go to the library more in the future, but that depends how things are going to work out in the current global pandemic. So here is book source as we compare it for all the years, and as you can see, I became a member of the library at the end of 2014, and I read quite a lot of books from the library in 2015 and 2016. Then it slowed down a bit in 2017, 18, and 19, and nothing in 2020 because pandemic. And then this year, 2021, I could go one. And it says that I read 21 books from the library, and I'm pretty sure I read all 25, so I'm not sure what happened there. Did I return something unread? Possibly. I also forgot to give a disclaimer, but it is possible that there are errors in these graphs or statistics. I managed to find some and fix them, but I can't rule out that there's still an error somewhere, or multiple. Then we get to the gender of the author, and in 2021, 36% of the books I read were written by male authors, 57% by female authors, 6% by multiple authors of different genre and of different genders, and 1% by other genders or non-binary authors. And yeah, I do feel like I've been gravitating more towards reading books by female authors. So back in 2013, I read about 50-50-ish male authors and female authors, with then a last few percentages taken up by multiple authors of different genders. But definitely I've been reading less male authors and more female authors the past few years. Also some works by multiple authors of different genders. So these are things like anthologies, but also, for example, the Geronimo Stilton books that are written by a team of people. And also the past few years I've tried to read a few more books by authors who are not male or not female. And this is something that I didn't know about before a few years ago. And there were also some authors where I was not sure, so they are classified as unknown. Then we get new or familiar author. So in 2021, 43% of the books were by new to me authors, 53% by authors that I already had read a book of in earlier years, and 4% were in combination. And a combination is then in the case that a book is written by multiple authors and I had already read some of those but not others, or things like that, or it's written by two authors and I've read from one of them before but not the other. I don't recall exactly what it was in this case, but yeah. So I read more familiar to me authors, but I also read quite a few new to me authors. And obviously once I've read one book by a new to me author, then their second book, then they get classified as a familiar author because I've read a book from them before. And comparing this against earlier years, it looks like I read more books by new to me authors than in 2020 or 2019. And apparently in 2013 I read a lot of new to me authors, so who knows? But yeah. Then we get to standalone or series books. So 52% of the books I read in 2021 were standalones, 25% were part of a series, and 23% was a combination. And by that I mean it is part of a series, but it's not a series with one continuing story, but the books can be read on their own, like they're separate stories, but like with the same characters, that kind of thing. So for example, some of the children's book series that I've read, like, well, for example, the Geronimo Stilton books, some of those, or Diary with a Wimpy Kid, but also some non-children's books fall under this as well. So it's basically like series is when it's really more connected and it's best to read the books in order and that kind of thing. And then in comparison to the whole year, I didn't divide between series and combination yet prior to 2017. So that is why the numbers for those before 2017 are kind of non-existent. But I know that a lot of the series that I read in 2015 and 2016 were children's books from the library, and a lot of those would fall under combination. But anyway. I read, it looks like slightly more standalones than in 2020, and definitely more than 2019, but also more combination than series, which, yeah, I do feel like I tend to be hesitant to start a new series or to read a book, a series where you have to read all the books like in order and you have to remember what's happening and stuff. And there are some series I would like to read, but I generally like to wait until all the books are out. Then we get to genres. 10% of the books I read in 2021 were fantasy, 5% was science fiction, 35% were contemporary fiction, which is my biggest genre in 2021. And it is a genre I like a lot, so I'm not really surprised by that. 3% was rom-com, 3% historical fiction, 2% literature. I'm pretty sure those are some Dutch literary thrillers. 7% detective and mystery, 3% thriller, 1% horror, 1% paranormal, 15% biography and memoir, 15% information, and 0% Disney and 0% art. Art is not even in this graph. I feel like it should be. I think I read one book that would be classified as art, but somehow that didn't get incorporated into this graph. Yeah, I didn't realize that I read roughly the same amount of information books as biography and memoir, because I prefer biography and memoir, so interesting. Yeah, so this graph, when I compare all the years, it does have art in it by the looks of it. And yeah. So this, on the y-axis, is not done percentage-wise, but by the amount of books read. And here we have it percentage-wise. It looks like I read less fantasy and less science fiction than in 2020. I read a lot more information books by the looks of it. And a variety of other genres. And, well, contemporary fiction looks like it's similar to 2020. Then we have fiction versus non-fiction. And this is 72% in 2021 being fiction. And 27% non-fiction. And 1% a combination. Presumably I read one or a couple of books where there were elements of both. So yeah, that's just over a quarter of non-fiction. So that's, yeah. So in 2013, I read quite a bit of non-fiction, and this number lessened. Well, actually not the number, but the percentage lessened after that. So once I graduated from university, which was in 2013, I was very tired, sensory overload. I didn't want to learn any stuff for a while, so I wanted to just read some escapist fiction. Well, the past few years I've definitely been reading a lot more non-fiction again, particularly biographies that I don't think I read those quite as much in 10 years ago, sort of thing. So then we get to the language of books. 61% of the books I read in 2021 were in English and 39% in Dutch. And in comparison to the past few years, that is a bit more Dutch. As you can see in the graph, in 2015 and 2016, I read a lot of Dutch books. In 2017 also. I went to the library a lot in those years. And, well, since I live in the Netherlands, the library has mostly Dutch books. So that's why. And then after that, I've read also a lot of my own books. But this year, it is nice that despite only going to the library once, I still read quite a bit of Dutch books. I read also some of my own Dutch books. And I also reread some Dutch children's books. For me personally, reading in two languages, I want to read some of both. It really depends on my mood. And I like to switch it up a bit. So if I've been reading in one language for a while, then I want the other one. Now we get to the original language that the book was originally written in. 61% of those was written in English, 28% of them in Dutch, and this is about 2021. And then 2% originally in Italian, 1% French, 2% German, 4% in Japanese, and then we have some other languages like Norwegian, Swedish, and Finnish. Was it Swedish 0%? I'm not sure. Because if it says it's rounding off here to whole percentages, and because I've read 240 books, that means if I were to have read 2 books in that language, it would round it off to 0, possibly. But yeah, anyway. Here's the graph comparing all of the years. So definitely more books in 2021 that were originally written in Dutch. And the data from earlier years is missing because I wasn't tracking this yet then. And by the looks of it, also quite a few other languages in 2021, whereas in earlier years there wasn't as much variety. Then we get to if the books were translations or not. So 82% of the books I read in 2021 I read in the original language that they were written in, and 18% were translations. And comparing this to earlier years, I read a bit less translations than in earlier years, and I find this explainable because I didn't use the library much, and when it comes to my own books, I tend to prefer to buy the original language book if the original language is English or Dutch. I haven't attempted to read a language other than those two for a long time. I do have a couple of books that are in other languages, but I haven't tried reading them yet, and that's more of a kind of a fun thing, not because I could have just bought the translation. So anyway, the library definitely has a lot more translations. So anyway, I hope the percentage of translations from the library, me reading from the library, will increase again. But when it comes to my own books and the original language is a language I can read, Dutch or English, then I like to actually read the original. So then we get to, I've called this nationality of author, but I'm not sure if it should be nationality or country or exactly what the right term is. I am not sure. So I hope this term doesn't offend anyone. Do let me know and I can change it. I think I've just called it country in the file name, but seemingly I forgot to edit the title. That's actually in the picture. So 29% of the books I read in 2021 were by US-based authors, 20% were from the UK, 26% were from the Netherlands, 4% were from Japan, 2% from Italy, 1% from Belgium, 2% Germany, 1% Norway, 2% Australia, 1% Ireland, and then it gets a bit more difficult to read. 1% Finland, and there are some other things there, but it's a bit hard to tell what is which at the moment. So I apologize. I know I have read from a couple of other countries, but it's a 0% because then it's less than 2 books. So but there are some other countries in there. So I've called it author country here, seemingly. I say seemingly, but these graphs already existed in the spreadsheet, so I just copied them. Anyway. And in 2021, it looks like I have read a bit more of a variety, and a bit less US authors by the looks of it, but more Dutch authors. And when I say Dutch, I mean authors from the Netherlands. I don't think those terms are quite interchangeable. Forgive me. Then we get to the age range. 36% of the books I read in 2021 were children's books. And I didn't actually read any picture books in 2021. So that's why that's 0%. I do like reading picture books now and then. But I only own some, and I've read all the ones I own, and I like to borrow them from the library, but since I only got to go once, and it had been such a long time, I prefer to borrow books that would take me a bit longer to read. Anyway, I hope to be able to read more picture books in the future. So 22% were young adult, and 42% were for adults. And this is the intended target audience. And for me, children's is like anything between 4 years old and 12 years old. And then young adult is, for me, anything between the ages of 12 to 18. So that's just how I do it. I know other people do it differently. Anyway. The age range in earlier years. Yeah, it looks like I've definitely read more children's books than in 2020 and less young adults. And it looks like the percentage of adults stayed about the same as in 2020. But yeah, as you can see, it has varied quite a bit throughout the years. In 2015, 2016, I went to the library a lot and I read a lot of children's books there. That's why those statistics are so high there. In 2013, I mostly read adult books. This was kind of before I rediscovered my love of children's books. So, and also young adult. Then we get to book format. 65% of the books I read in 2021 were paperbacks, 23% were hardbacks, and these are books with a hard cover but no dust jacket. 9% were hardcovers with a dust jacket, 3% were on my Kindle, and a small percentage was I think one book that I could read for free on an author's website, and nothing from the computer. The computer is a category I added when I read some graphic novels that I got from Humble Bundle, and I read those on the computer because my Kindle is not in color. So, then book format versus earlier years. It looks like I've actually read less paperbacks than in 2020, but then again more than in 2019. So, you know. Yeah, so in the Netherlands, library loans tend to be hardbacks with no dust jacket. So that's why those percentages are so high in 2015, 2016. Also, the numbers here for 2017, 2018 are exactly the same, which makes me wonder if someone, me, didn't mess this up, because that seems very unlikely. So I'm gonna call it and say that I think this is an error. There we go, that is now fixed. Then we have book type. So 65% of the books I read in 2021 were novels, 1% were short stories or short story collections, 4% were part of omnibuses, 1% was a novella, 15% were information books, 14% were biographies and memoirs, and one picture book? I don't know. That's what it looks like. I thought I didn't read any picture books, so I don't know. Then type of book in comparison to earlier years. Then format of book. 54% were books written in prose. 2% were books in verse, and this is the books in 2021. 27% were illustrated, 4% were manga, 3% were comics, 10% were graphic novels and memoirs, and seemingly I did read one book that can be classified as a picture book. Yeah, and here we have that versus early years, and here I call it book type. Things are a mess. I was actually gonna tell you why this video is also a bit late, because I didn't feel well for a while, but I completely forgot, so well done, messy brain. Thank you. Okay, so seemingly I read quite a bit more illustrated books than in the past couple of years, but not quite as many manga and comics and graphic memoirs, graphic novels. Then we get to publication years, and this is about over 2021. So the blue is the publication years of the editions that I read, and the red is the original publication years, because, well, sometimes I read let's say a paperback edition of a book that originally comes out in hardcover, etc. Yeah, so I mainly read newer books. That's just what I prefer. I don't tend to read a whole lot of books that were published before I was born, and I was born in the 1980s. And then there were also some books that are classified as unknowns, there's various. This is particularly when I can't put also 1 year. Let's say if I read an omnibus and some of them were published in this year, some of them in that year. So, publication years for the past few years. This is a little bit hard maybe to make sense of straight away. We can see a kind of diagonal effect, because obviously In, let's say, 2017, I could not possibly have read a book that came out after 2017, etc. And then original publication years. I rate books on a scale from 1 to 10, as opposed to the 5-star system that most people use. So this is my ratings in 2021, and I tend to be more on the lenient side and not that critical. And yeah, I really kind of wish Excel would use different colors for this, because I am not so keen on like these sort of darker colors. But I have mostly 8, 9, and 10 ratings and not so many lower ones, because if I am really not liking a book, I tend to DNF it, and then it doesn't get to the statistics because I don't count books that I DNF. So if I think if I'm hating a book and I will probably give it a low rating, I'll probably not even bother finishing it, sort of thing, because I usually don't want to. So I feel like I had less 10 out of 10 books in 2021 and more 9s and 8s, and also more lower rated books. Oh yeah, and this is the same thing, but then the y-axis is not percentage based, but based on books read, to put things in perspective, I guess. Oh yeah, and then this is the same graph, but then each rating is a different bar. Is that what you call that? I don't even know. And clearly somebody here forgot to enlarge this graph, so well done me. The average rating, which tends to be on the high side, because if I'm not liking a book, it tends to happen usually earlier on in the book, and I just DNF it. And then the gender of the protagonist. So the protagonist is the main character. 28% were male, 42% were female, 21% we had more than one main character, with in total more than one gender, if that makes sense. So like it was an ensemble cast, I think people call that. 3% were other and non-binary, and 6% was not applicable. This is the case in, for example, information books that are not about specific characters, or where the author is not writing from their own perspective, but like, yeah, information. So here it is in comparison to earlier years. Okay, then we get to writing style, part 1. 41% of the books I read in 2021 were written in first person, 30% in third person, and 29% was a combination. This is not only books written from other perspectives, but also in the cases of graphic novels, manga, comics. And comparing that to early years, less combinations, more third person, similar first person the past few years. 35% were written in past tense, 24% in present tense, and 41% was a combination. Again, combination is also graphic novels, manga, comics, or at least it can be, as well as books that that are narrated in present tense, but then there's past tense flashbacks or stuff like that. Yeah, and it looks like I've read more books in present tense in 2021. But also some more in past tense and less combinations, because I read less manga. Then we get debut versus non-debut. A quarter of the books I read in 2021 were authors' debut books. And to me, an author can only have one debut book. 62% were non-debut books. 1% was a combination. And 11% I was not able to verify for sure that it was a debut. And yeah, comparing that to early years. Then we get to page numbers. 54% were less than 250 pages. 40% were between 250 and 500 pages. And 6% were 500 plus page books. I indeed seem to be gravitating more towards shorter books and not so much towards really long books. And this is the page length, but a bit more detail in it over 2021. Definitely most books read in the 100 to 399 page range. The division broadly looks similar to 2020, but more zoomed in. Well, there are a few differences, not lots. I'm sorry, I'm tired. But I want to finally do this video because I've been meaning to do it for a while now, but I couldn't. So yeah, seasonal books. I read 12 Christmas books and 12 summer books and 2 autumn books and no spring books in 2021, or 46%, 46%, 8%, 0%. And then, of course, when you add all the books that had not a specific season, you can see that not that much of my reading is actually seasonal. Yeah, I didn't realize I read that many summer books either. I feel like I mostly read Christmas books, but that's because I just read those in December. So then we get to cover and spine colors. And this, I just find this interesting. This is for 2021, and seemingly I read a lot of books with multicolored covers. So the blue is the cover color and the red is the spine color. It gets classified as multi if there is not one prominent color on the cover, but it has more than one color that is used. So I try to look for which color is the most on this cover, but sometimes it's like a whole mixture of colors, and then it's just multi. I keep gravitating towards blue books, as we can see, but blue is my favorite color. And there was also quite a few books with white covers and especially white spines, and way more black spines, for example, than black covers. And yeah, the last bit is non-applicable for ebooks. They don't have a spine. And seemingly I also read one book that didn't have a cover. Yeah, that was probably a short story from an author's website. Anyway, looking at this in comparison to earlier years, and here I've given the color that it is a sort of similar color, if that makes sense. You kind of have to see it to understand. So I can compare it to earlier years. Seemingly blue I read even more books in 2016 that were with a blue cover. This is just me being a nerd. So, but I do find it interesting to see trends in book publishing to do with like these things. But of course, what I read is not what's published right now, because obviously I read a mixture of things. So, and the spine color as well. Also, I just love these colors. I too like rainbow colors a lot. Although there's, not as much orange. And here we have cover color and spine color sort of combined. Yeah. Then we get to amount of words in the title, and admittedly, this is a very nerdy one. So most books that I've read in 2021 have between 1 and 6 words in the title. And there's not as many longer word titles. I don't know why you'd want to compare this with previous years, but I'm a nerd. Hello. Then the books I read per month in 2021, November and April were my highest reading months in terms of amount of books. And February and June were quite low. March as well. Actually, November is because I went to the library in, I think, near the end of October. So that'll be by November is so high. Books read per month in early years, and this is on an absolute scale of how many books. Because I find it interesting to see if I have specific months where I read more or less. That kind of thing. Although I haven't really yet been able to figure that really out. But anyway, I also like the colors. And this is the books read per month, but then in a percentage scale. So the past few years, November was a quite good reading month, but then in 2018 it really was not. So, and September was a great reading month in 2020. So yeah, it kind of varies. And then books read per month displayed in another way. And I just like the colors. Then pages per month. And this is not necessarily the same. So we can see April is still very high, but November is a bit lower. So seemingly I read lots of shorter books in November, which makes sense because those were the library loans, and I tend to borrow more shorter books than longer books. In fact, November and December are very close together. But the amount of books I read in November was definitely a little higher. October is lower here, as is February, March, and June. Then, pages read per month, in comparison to earlier years. And this is the same thing, but without all the numbers. And then, in another different way, seemingly the legend is overlapping the end bit a bit of the graph, so that will have to be fixed at some point. Pages per genre. So 13% fantasy, 4% science fiction, 30% contemporary fiction. You know what? You can hopefully see it. I don't really need to read all of these out loud, hopefully. I'm sorry. Pages read per genre. Comparison to earlier years. I'm sorry, I'm tired, you can probably tell. Pages read per genre in a percentage scale. And again, but then in a different way. Smallest book read per year, this doesn't really mean much. Longest book read per year. The interesting thing here is that, so in 2021, the longest book I read was 1,237 pages, which is the exact same amount of pages in 2015, but it was the same book, because I reread this book in 2021, so that makes sense. And in 2016 it was The Stand. I remember that because I know that has that amount of pages. So in 2020 I didn't really read many long books, but this year a bit more. And this is the comparison. Amount of days it took to read books. So definitely I had less reads in 2020 that I read within one day. And more books that took me longer. I also did more buddy reads, I believe. At least in comparison to before 2020. Because in 2018 and 19 I wasn't doing as many buddy reads. Then we have genre versus age ranges. So blue is infants, but I didn't read any picture books in 2021 for infants, so there are no blue columns. Red for children, green for young adult, and purple for adults. I read a lot of children's fantasy books in 2021, and not so many for young adult and adults. I read a lot of children's and young adult contemporary fiction. More adult historical fiction and rom-com, but that kind of makes sense. More adult mysteries. More adult biography and memoirs, because most of the memoirs I read are targeted towards adults. And now we get the age ranges per genre per year. In 2021 I mostly read children's fantasy books and not so many adult and young adult fantasy books. And I would like to get more into adult fantasy again. I'm not as interested anymore as in young adult fantasy, but I've seemingly really been enjoying children's or like middle grade fantasy books. Science fiction, contemporary fiction, which is my most read genre, and I particularly like children's and young adult contemporary fiction. That's not to say I don't like adult contemporary fiction, but rom-com, it makes sense that most of those were adult in 2021, because it tends to be romance, but not exclusively. Anyway, 7 historical fiction for adults. I mostly read historical fiction for adults in 2021. For adult literature, that would be literary thrillers, and I did mostly adult detective and mysteries. I don't really have a lot of mysteries that aren't for adults, I think, on my shelves. Thriller, the variety. Paranormal. I didn't read lots of those. information. Most of the information books were for adults, but I also read some that were targeted towards a younger audience. Yeah, Disney is. I didn't read any of that in 2021, but these are Donald Duck pockets, so it makes sense that they're only for children. And I read one art book. So this is what I read per month, per age range, per year, if that makes sense. So on the y-axis, it is the absolute percentages. On the x-axis is the years, and then it's per month. So the left top is January, and then we go from left to right, and then down from left to right. If that makes sense. Yeah. Also, seemingly September's graph has no numbers, so I'm not sure what happened there. But clearly I messed up. So, yeah, and I try to read from. Yeah, I tend to usually read from like the 3 main age ranges every month, but it varies, and some months I'm more pulled towards this or that. Then the genres per month. So this is in 2021, and then we get the genres per month, per year, I guess. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. But again, we start at the left top and go from left to right, starting with January, and then work our way down. Yeah, so what I read in a genre really depends on my mood. In each month, I've read at least some contemporary fiction, but for the rest of the genres, it varies. And then we have new reads versus rereads, and seemingly February has ended up without numbers, so yeah. So again, we start from the left to top, read from left to right, and then top to bottom. And yeah, so some months I have reread quite a bit. For example, in January 2021, almost half of the books I read were rereads. But in some other months, I didn't reread anything. And in some months, I reread more. Yeah. Then we get to like some diversity stuff, which I don't think I showed most of it last year because it is still messy and I'm still not sure of what is the best way to track it, but I thought I'll throw it in anyway. This is the book diverse? Yes, no, some. Some means if it's like a side character and not like a main character, if that makes sense. Some people call this ish, but the book gets a no if all the people in it are white, cisgendered, heterosexual, neurotypical, able-bodied people, etc., etc. And it gets a yes if I'm getting tired and I've been talking for a while. Okay. So, in 2021, more books got yes than no, but I still feel that the no is quite a bit higher in percentage than in earlier years. And again, I didn't have this data before 2019. The fact is that a lot of the books that have been on my shelf for a while that I bought years ago, those books are not very diverse, and they mostly feature white, able-bodied, neurotypical, straight characters. Because child me and teenage me didn't really know much about that kind of stuff, and also back then, what was popular in the bookshops didn't have as much. So I have been buying more the first books, but when I read, like especially if I reread stuff from my childhood, then anyway. Moving on, rambling, yeah. My concentration is like under the table at the moment. Then we get content warnings, which I don't know if I've ever showed this before. But seemingly I read more books with a yes than with a no in 2021, which I think is a first by the looks of it. So, I guess I've been reading more about heavier topics. So this gets a yes if I think the book should come with a content warning. If it discusses heavy topic or trauma or, yeah. This is obviously subjective. But, these are my reading statistics. And I'm not waving in anybody's face saying, "Look, you got to put this on the book." That's not what I'm doing here. I just find it interesting to see how my reading develops. That's all. So this one is about neurodiversity, and I have seemingly read less books with that than in earlier years. At least as far as the full yes goes, I have read some with some. So I have read more books, I think, with like side characters that were neurodiverse, but not as many with main characters. And I do have some books on my TBR still, but also there's not lots, and I kind of want to savor them and be in the exact right mood for them. And the same for I think I've read actually most of the autism memoirs I have, but I still have some more to read. But again, I like to savor them and not like generally read lots of them in a short time span. You know, a lot of the books on my shelf don't have neurodiverse characters. So anyway, I feel like I would have preferred this to be higher, but yeah. Then we get to mental health, and interestingly, I read a lot of books with mental health representation in 2021, so probably an indication of how my mental health was doing and has been doing. Not that great, but at least I could find some book characters to relate, I suppose. So there is that, although again it is subjective, so because it's not always like specifically written on the page, so this is obviously all my own interpretation. Then LGBTQ Plus, yeah, I also would like this to be higher, although it is a bit similar to the past 2 years. Yeah, it's also difficult because in a lot of the older children's books, like from my childhood, you didn't have much of that. I'm glad we are seeing more children's books with LGBTQ plus people and elements in it. Person of color. This is about the character, by the way, not the author. So the main character, and it's some if it's like side characters, but not actually the main character, if that makes sense. And I would have preferred this number for 2001 to be higher as well. But yeah, a lot of the books on my shelf, particularly older ones, have just white characters, which is something that I sadly didn't notice when I was, 10 years younger than I am now. But yeah. Disability, which is unfortunately quite low. I mean, percentage-wise at least. So yeah, I would like this to be higher. Yeah, unfortunately, amount of books published with disabled characters are in a minority, and again, combination with what I actually have on my shelves. Yeah, but I would like this number to be higher. But I do want to read what I have on my shelves as well. So yeah, but yeah, I think there should definitely be more attention for disability in books and other media. Then we have health and illness. And again, this is subjective. So there's more some than in 2020. Some is when it's not the main character, but say the main character's parent or something like that. Because I think I did read some books where one of the parents of the main character was ill or passed away from this illness. And so it can be debated sometimes what belongs where, but again, this is very subjective. Then religion, and I have only been tracking this for the past 2 years. So we have more some, but less yes. Now, I don't tend to gravitate very much towards books that discuss where religion plays a big part, because I am not religious, and I don't like it when books are very preachy. But I do find it interesting to read about characters with, well, I would say a religion other than my own, but I don't have one. So particularly a religion that's not Christianity, because in the Netherlands that is or was kind of the main religion. So it is not my intention for this number to be like very high, but I would like to read more about characters with religions that I'm less familiar with. And I have read some books with characters who are Muslim, characters who are Jewish, for example. Yeah, so I like to do that. Then we have body type, and this one is sadly also lower than I would like it, but at least it's an improvement over 2020, so that's something. And this mainly means, not a medium straight sized person, but fat people, but not just that. Also, people who have bodies that are not the norm. So this can also be disabled, depending on what the disability is. Character with one leg, or I don't precisely remember what these 28 plus 14 books were that I read that had some of this in it, but yeah, as someone who is fat and who has I was gonna say a scarred face, but the scars are not just on my face. This is something that is important to me. So, and then we have type of diversity, and this is a little bit misleading because some books have more than one type of diversity, and some books have none. So, if a book has more than one type of diversity, I type all the elements into the spreadsheet. So, if it has, let's say, mental health and person of color, it's counting that for both, if that makes sense. So, the total added up here is not the total amount of books read. Because really, if you can see, I did not read 400 plus books in 2021. But, yeah, I haven't figured quite out how to best deal with those overlapping intersectionality, because some people make one category that says combination, but a lot of them are combinations. So, yeah, anyway. And yeah, this is the same graph, but then in a percentage scale. It's interesting that the none is the same amount in 2020 as 2021. That is the end. Wow, I sound like I'm surprised, but I actually compiled all of these graphs and then narrated over them. So I'm watching my own video, but then I have to adjust how long we see each graph based on how long I was talking about it, if that makes sense. I'm sorry that this video was a bit messy. More messy than I wanted it to be honest. It's clear nearer the end of January now than it is the beginning of January, so I really wanted to get this video done. Because I wanted to do it earlier, but I couldn't because I spent about a week and a half on the couch and in bed in my pajamas. And in order to, edit videos and graphs and stuff, I have to be at the computer, and I didn't feel well enough to sit up. I do love working on reading statistics and also watching other people's statistics videos, although by now most of them are probably posted. So I'm just a bit late. I'm sorry about that. I hope you enjoyed this. If you stayed till the end, thank you so very much. I really appreciate you listening and watching all my rambling and my graphs and letting me indulge in my nerdiness. Yeah, and please do leave a comment down below if you like, and I like if you like. Let me know what you thought, or tell me about your reading statistics, or do you not like keeping those, or how was your reading year in 2021? I don't know, I feel like I actually learned something now, but I feel very tired, so we learned that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye!